everyone. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Malika Ramsey Show. Thank you very much for joining us this week. I trust that you all had a great week. Yes, if I was looking the wrong way, my cameraman just reminded me where to look. But I trust that you all had a great week, a productive one, a safe one. Hope that you're still keeping all of those COVID protocols, wearing your mask, washing your hands, sanitizing when you can't wash, and of course keeping as safe as possible distance away from each other for now. That's the world we're living in. We can't do anything about it, but we have to follow the rules if we want to stay healthy and to continue to stay safe. Alright, so tonight we are going to venture into an area that is not my own. I always tell people I'm not an expert on this area. I'm not even close to being an expert. So tonight I might be schooled a bit. I have one of Guyana's experts in studio with me. And of course we'll be talking about sport tonight. Sport in Guyana and sport in general. And this is somebody who I've known for years. I've worked with before. And I know he's very, very passionate about what happens in the world of sport. Not only locally, but also internationally. But what we'll do is take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we'll be chatting with who I like to call, he's a journalist, but I still can call him to some extent a sport icon. Stay with the Malika Ramsey Show. And thanks again for inviting us into your homes for another great, what promises to be another great conversation. For those of you who are in, I think it's Central Georgetown, we call this area. I know it's raining right now, so we hope that you can bundle up, cuddle up, and enjoy tonight's conversation. It is my pleasure to welcome and to thank him for accepting our invitation on the Malika Ramsey Show. The one and only, like I said, I call him a sport icon, Rawle Toney. Rawle, welcome to our program.
Thanks a lot, Malika. I'll accept it.
You can accept it. You can take all he had to give you tonight.
I'm taking it now. Accepting my flowers now. It's a pleasure to be here. Oh. I was like, Malika, want to talk about sports? Like anyway,
yes,
I never pass up an opportunity to discuss sports.
And to teach. It's going to be a teaching and a learning moment.
The more we discuss, the more people get involved.
And on that note, I go immediately into the first question. Even before we talk about Rawle Toney, the sports journalist. Why is it that, especially women in our country, and again, I know some women out there going to want to beat me up for saying this, but it's a fact. Why is it that people are so, and in some cases men too, are so hesitant to get into the realm of sport in terms of what is happening with sports in Guyana? Why do you think that is?
I guess it's a culture. Really and truly, we don't really have a sport culture. We love music, we love arts, but when it comes to sport, we love sport, but loving it enough to really pay attention to it, to really, really dive into various aspects of sport. We really do not have a sport culture. We're a society that really follows sport when it's seasonal. We're going to support if it's the Olympics, if it's the Commonwealth Games, if it's a major sport event, we will give that support. But to filter that support to what's happening locally, no, we don't. We don't really have a sport culture in Guyana. I mean, some might argue that we do. But from where I stand and what I've been doing for a living for the last 17 to 18 years, I don't see a sporting culture here in Guyana.
And I know you're very passionate about it, but we're going to come to that passion a little later on. For some people, it may sound or seem frivolous, but is it possible for us to change that culture? Do we need teams, organizations, people bringing more sport to us in our homes, in our living rooms, on our computers, on our phones? Can we change the culture?
If to change the culture, we have to change the way we treat sport or the way in which you treat something. And I think governments past and present, we've seen a bit more efforts over the last decade or so. I think that's where everything starts, because they drive the policy behind it. And I mean, someone shared an article, Sharon Walker, citation. Sharon is like a walking encyclopedia for sport. Like, Sharon, what happened in 1906 or something? And funny enough, I saw him share a clipping from a newspaper from the Guyana Chronicle 33 to 35 years ago, when they had a national sports conference, well, similar to a sports conference, where they had the associations they would have met to really come up with a sports policy. Now, we're talking about nearly 35 to 36 years ago, heading to 40 years even so. And in 2021, we're still having a discussion about no sport policy. So when you look at how we treat sport, I mean, then you could understand why I say that we really don't have that culture here in Guyana for sports.
All right, we're gonna come back to sports conference. Let me see if I get it right. I think we had what was being what journalists quote as the inaugural sports conference. We had that held recently, but even before we talk about that, I want to talk about Rawle Toney, the journalist. When I met you initially, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, you are not a sports journalist.
I've always been.
You've always been a sports journalist, so you always loved sport.
4, yeah. I played. I've always been involved in sport my entire life. I grew up in a sport family. Mother, father. My mother was a national athlete. My father loved boxing, but it didn't like him. What I mean? But I grew up in a sport family. I've always been involved in sport. Growing up in Linden, actually, you had to be involved in sport. Linden is the epitome of what having a culture in sport is about. When you grow up in Linden, you have to play some sport. It's like a must, and it's like when you don't play sport, people trouble you like, yo, relax, you don't even play that.
Yeah, right. So it become like a stigma.
Yeah, so growing up, I've always been involved in sport. Always been involved in sport.
Right.
Funny how I came into doing sport journalism, but that's a whole other discussion. However, when I started out, 2003-4, NCN, it was sport, just sport. I mean, I dabble in a lot of other things, but primarily sport.
All right, we'll talk about that dabbling. Here's if you're now tuning in. Of course, my conversation this evening is with sports journalist Rawle Toney. Aside from the fact that what drives you, you did say you came from a sports family, you grew up in Linden where it was a must. What keeps you interested though and drive you? Because again, Rawle Toney is not only interested in sport locally. We see Facebook arguments and viewers. I follow these arguments not because I know sport, but for fun.
I think traveling, growing up a bit overseas, really helped in terms of my interest in what happens over the pond and regionally. But really getting out and really traveling and covering sport. Whenever sport teams and associations, they participate in international tournaments. So I make it a duty over in my career to attend as much international events and tournaments as possible, even if Guyana is participating or not. As I mentioned, but growing up overseas for a bit, growing up with my father and living in the US, I think that helped in terms of paying attention to what happens outside of it. And more so, it's television, everyone is in tune. Once you like football, you have to like the Premier League, you have to follow the Champions League, you have to follow what's happening with La Liga, have a discussion on your favorite, sport person, man or woman. And that brings us back to the point, to your initial question about why we don't really pay much interest, because you would see thousands of people lining up. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, you would have seen the Champions League viewing party would have scores of people, all over the place. But when you look at for that to be translated into a local football tournament or event, it pales in comparison. Like, really, it doesn't even compare. You can't even compare the two. So it's funny enough that we really pay more interest in what happens outside of Guyana in sport rather than what happens here. Sometimes I take the most simple information I would share to social media. People's like, oh wow, I never knew. I was like, yo bro, it's right there. All the time. This person, Malika's been playing squash, badminton or whatever all the time. But she's never been highlighted for being an exceptional player, even though she would have been competing with the best in the world and being successful at it. So, and even as journalists, I think we too have a major role to play in that as well too.
All right, I'm going to ask Rawle Toney this next question, and I know some people are very sensitive. I am not. It's not knocking.
Very candid.
I'm not knocking our local sportsmen and sportswomen. I can't do what they do, but I'm going to ask you this. And I'm asking this because you talked about your travels and so on. What makes athletes from, and I'm just calling random countries here, who we know, what makes athletes from Barbados, Jamaica, and these other countries, why are they superior to ours?
I think our athletes are really undersold. Funny enough, I've had this discussion many times, and I've been asked this, and I tell people I don't think they're superior. I think what they have is a better program to be better at what they do. For example, when Chelsea Edgell played at the Olympics in table tennis, she was the first English-speaking Caribbean woman to play at the Olympics in the history of table tennis at the Olympic Games, which has been at the Olympics since the Olympic Games in Seoul. That's when table tennis was first played. The English-speaking Caribbean would have never had a female player at the Olympic Games. There was Chelsea Edgell, and the funny enough is that the way in which she got there, she had the only the only female wild card in the world. So while the ITTF offered 2 spots, 1 male and 1 female, out of all the millions of table tennis players, she had 1. Additionally, we have one of the most successful athletes from London, Chantal O'Bright, the country's most decorated curve to game athlete. She's doing well right now in the NCAA. We have athletes who departed Guyana and holding records at the University of Florida, the Florida Gators, and so forth. We have athletes excelling at Clemson. Our athletes, we're not short on talent. What we're short on is exposure. So while we might feel as though the athletes from Jamaica and Barbados and Trinidad, they might seem superior, whenever we get a chance, when our best athletes get a chance to compete against them, they really excel. So it's not that they're superior; they've just been exposed a bit more. They have more support being given to them. And look what happens every time our athletes get the support that they need. They actually really excel.
And I'm assuming too, when you're talking about support, we can't do anything without finances.
Of course, not just yes, go you do really well. The nation's behind you. I'm talking about really putting the money where the athlete needs to be. For example, I use Chelsea Edgell. I've seen her budget at the bare minimum. When I look at her budget at the bare minimum and the support that she has been receiving financially, I really can't do anything. But when you look at the fact that she went to the Olympics, she won a game. She hasn't played tennis in however long internationally. Shamar Britton just competed at the Ecuador Open. He went to the round of 16, haven't played in 18 months. In Ghana, no table tennis is being played because of COVID-19 pandemic, of course, and the GTT haven't been able to restart the tournament. So every time our athletes really got a chance to compete with the best of their peers, they excel. And they compete against people that really have tons of finances being thrown behind them. So the minute we have our athletes start receiving, for example, I know you haven't reached theirs yet, so we have the National Sports Academy coming up where athletes will be given a chance to get some sort of money in their pocket while training, having elite training, and so forth. You will see the difference that would make for our athletes. So again, only yesterday I was having this similar discussion in the barbershop with the guys, and I was telling them, it's not the fact that we don't have good athletes, they know this, but the fact that our athletes aren't as supported as the people they compete against.
Rawle, it's a lot. It really is a lot to take in, more than a mouthful.
It is.
Regardless of who is in power at what time, at what year, whatever, do you believe that the sports authorities, the people who we put in power to run our sports, and again, this has nothing to do with who's in power, regardless of who's in power, are they listening to people like you?
I would say, alright, so forgive me, people, I could only be Malika
candid.
Ramsey.
Yes, he's very
so
candid.
What happened was, over the last couple of years prior to 2020, you had people going in opposite direction that were in charge of sports. You had the National Sports Commission by Christopher Jones heading in the right direction. Then you had the Ministry of Culture, it was the Department of Culture, Youth and Sport then, heading in another direction. So one of the mistakes that was made then was you set up a really good functioning sports commission. At least to me it was functioning with good ideas, good people, passionate people behind it. But then you took sport and put it as a department. So it moves from being a ministry into the department.
You reduce the importance.
Exactly. So you reduce the importance of it at the ministry, but then you had the sports commission going in one way. So what you found was the sports commission heading in the direction that athletes need to go, and then they headed into a roadblock with the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport then the Department of Culture, Youth and Sport. What you find now is the ministry and the sports department working in tandem. You've seen athletes getting more support. It's not the best, but for me, I'm happy with where it was going. And I was saying that if we had that happening then, like a couple of years ago, we would have been heading in the right direction. Sport has really taken a hit under the previous administration, not this administration, but the PPPC administration for the past couple of 23 years, in terms of they haven't really paid much emphasis on sport. I've seen the entire opposite happening now, where a lot of money, first and foremost, they had a largest budget, 1 point something billion for sport alone, and we've seen that change. But before, it really put a dent in how our sportsmen and women should be treated. And then, as I mentioned, in terms of the counterproductive work that has been happening prior to the election last year, so now things have been looking up. If only things had been going in the same direction back then, we would have been in a better position.
And now, I guess we don't have sportsmen and sportswomen here who strictly do sport. Some of them do sport for them, even though, yes, they may go on the international scene or whatever. Here, it's like a hobby for them, where they actually have other day jobs.
The funny thing is that we sport in Guyana is still pretty much amateur. It's amateur. We don't have athletes who compete professionally on a daily basis, minus outside of cricketers. The cricketers, they are, they
that's
receive, that's some of them is their job. Some of them, even though they work, they still get a stipend or whatever the case may be, based on the contract, the central retainer contract they might sign with Guyana Cricket Board or Cricket West Indies or whatever. But outside of that, you really we don't have professional sport being played in Guyana. So everyone is amateur. So what you found recently is that from football to basketball to everything is really, when you travel to compete, is really professional versus amateur. So what you found is that a number of countries really turned into the diaspora, and in the diaspora, there are professional athletes. You understand? So it's really night and day when our sportsmen and women travel to compete. Which is why I tell people, give them their flowers, as the people, youths might say no, because when you look at what they do and what they go out there to achieve and what they would have accomplished, they shouldn't be competing on no stage with anyone that does sport for a living. You understand?
They're at a disadvantage. They're
at a disadvantage, and the fact that they've been able to do really well. That sometimes even though I'm critical of sportmen and what they do, because you have to be honest with people, I really sometimes hold back from criticizing their performance,
because you know their position.
Circumstances. So when somebody say, "Oh, why you tell people the truth? They get last at the Olympics." That's like, bro, the fact that they're at the Olympics alone should be commended. Not everyone could win a medal at the Olympics. You don't invest a medal. We don't invest money into our athletes to win medals at any event for us to demand the medal from them. Until we started doing that, then we could say, oh, Malika Louise struggling is because she had $2 million being thrown behind her the last month. We don't even give them $1, so to speak, unless they go to perform. So to compete rather. So unless you start giving money for medal, then we could ask them for medals.
All right, viewers, we're chatting with Rawle Toney. We're talking sport tonight. We'll take a quick break. On the other side of the break, we'll have more. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Well, the time always flies when we're having so much fun here. And tonight, I think, no offense to my other guests, I know they will still love me, but I think my favorite so far just might be Rawle, because I am learning.
Everybody's favorite.
Rawle, let's talk about, let me see if I got it right again. Yes, the recently held inaugural sports conference. What will that, or what is it expected to do for Guyana and our sportsmen and women?
All right, so I was one of the moderators at the sport conference as well. Myself, Avinash Akin Green, and Franklin Wilson from Kite News. The sport conference was really bringing together the core sports. So what the ministry did, they identified 12 core sports, and 12 core sports, and then they would have brought them together to discuss various areas, you know, be it marketing, be it public relations, be it, you know, media relations, and a whole host of other topics, that some of the things that would plague us. Coming out of that sport conference, it was really to begin the discussion for the National Training Academy that the Ministry of Culture and Sport, National Sports Commission, with a directive from the Ministry of Culture and Sport, will be having. So from that, you would find the core sports, identifying athletes, their elite athletes, some of their best athletes, to go through elite training, and then, you know, have coaches go through training as well too. And it's something that was needed, because you would find our athletes being here, they just train whenever they got to go to compete,
as you said,
and some of whom would have to take time off from work, some of whom would have to do training after work. So what you find is that now is that the ministry is paying those athletes to just train and compete whenever they can over a prolonged period. They're still going through the framework of it. Now, if it goes according to plan, we should find our athletes, one, being compensated for the time in training here in Guyana, because you find that our athletes go to different corporate entities for sponsorship, and then, you know, people really frown up on sport, like, hold a 10,000, and not knowing that athlete's expense is really 200-300 grand. There's not even a drop in the water for that athlete. So if it goes according to plan, you would find athletes being trained on a consistent basis while being paid for it, coaches being paid as well too, and with a distinct interest in the athletes from the hinterland region and the indigenous communities as well too. In fact, you know, one of the indigenous athlete from the hinterland, from Cameroon, scored one of the winning goals on the 17 girls championship in the CONCACAF qualifiers, and that goal was pivotal for Guyana advancing to the championship round of the qualifiers. Well, advancing from the qualifiers as well too. So it's about creating opportunities and so forth. So definitely our sportsmen and women will benefit tremendously from it if it works and goes according to plan.
All right, our time is going quickly. Rawle, I got 2 questions here I want to ask you.
Answer them as short as possible.
As short as possible. Most memorable journalist story in terms of sport. Most memorable.
Wow. Oh, all right. So I have Deshana Skeet. We had an athlete from Linden whose mother, when she was competing at the South American Youth Championship, she won gold, the only gold medal for Guyana. And when she came back, then I learned that her mother used to walk Linden under that donation sheet, asking people to give money for her daughter to train and so forth. Overwhelming with the support that she got after I wrote that article. I wrote another article for a young lady, I'm not going to mention her name, an athlete. Christopher Jones would have called to say, yo, I need some support for this athlete. Do something for me. And it was chilling out. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. I mean, it was chilling, telling her story and seeing the support that she would have had, even from the First Lady at the time, even from ministers of government. And that athlete was asking for the same support that she got eventually, you know, her conditions of living, the fact that she was successful and not complaining and so forth. So those two, I've had like quite a lot, but those two are very distinct, because I really paid attention to what it would have done, what the articles and so forth would have done for those athletes and the appearance.
Rawle Toney's greatest athlete of all, greatest sports person of all time, whether international or local. And I know you always got these arguments.
I have my favorite football players, right? Hear me out. My favorite football player from Guyana is Gregory Richardson, Jackie Chan, and Cristiano Ronaldo. My favorite football player. Of course, Pelé is everyone's favorite, but Cristiano Ronaldo, Gregory Richardson. It's really hard to top my basketball icon.
Note I said greatest. I know you were going to go basketball.
Yeah.
I know you were. I see the Facebook arguments. They're entertaining.
Cristiano Ronaldo is my greatest athlete in sport, and along with Carly Lloyd.
And you see, viewers, I'm being taught because I don't know who we just spoke about.
But
y'all gonna have to forgive me.
I would have named my daughter Carly Lloyd. Sorry, football player from the U.S.
That is so sweet.
Football player.
In a minute, Rawle. I mean, viewers, we're gonna have to bring him back sometime later, sometime in the new year at some point. But in a minute, and again, this is me, this is my opinion, you don't have to agree with me. Yes, I'm being biased tonight. He is one of Guyana's top sport journalists. I call him a sport icon. But in a minute,
Yeah.
what do you want to leave with persons watching this program who will be watching it on YouTube and Facebook and so on? What do you want to leave with them about sport in Guyana, whether it's advice, whatever?
All right, sport in Guyana is very real. Our sportsmen and women go through real things that we see other athletes go through. We try our best to share those stories from a media perspective, but they need support. We can't demand performance from them when we don't invest the kind of money that they need to perform. So our athletes, sportsmen and women, particularly our young girls, more so from the hinterland and the indigenous communities, they really need our support. They really need corporate support, and as much support as possible. And also what we do need, first and foremost, more importantly, is an established sport policy. Nothing changes unless we have an established sports policy. Right?
All right. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave our conversation right there with Rawle Toney. Thank you very much for coming on the program. All right, viewers, we'll take a quick break. On the other side of the break, it will be time for tonight's final word. Stay with us. We're back with tonight's final word, and it's kind of like a treat for you. These are, we have to go quickly, but I promise we're going to have this again next week, so just so you can understand what is happening here. This is Charlon Ross. He is the proprietor of, you heard me a couple of weeks ago talk about one of the sponsors being Royal Designs. He's here to talk about a very unique, lovely, it's good for, Christmas is coming, it's good for gifts. You don't even have to buy it, you can gift it to yourself, but I'm going to let him tell you exactly what it is because he is the expert. Charlon, the floor is yours.
All right, what you're actually looking at here is 3D printed LED lamps. We could use in many functions. It starts from a sketch, then we run it through our 3D software, splice it, convert it into STL file, and then we run it through the 3D machine.
So what you're saying is that you made this from scratch. You didn't order this online and selling it back.
No, you can't find this in any store anywhere.
All right. Continue.
Yes, we have it in the different functions. You see, we have it blinking, we have it in the mode, and you have it still. And
you'll get a better view of this if the lights are off in the dark. Of course, we can't turn off the lights in the studio. But yeah, the idea, you'll see the full beauty of it.
I mean, if you don't want to spend too much on your blinkers, use one you put in the house, it gives you the same effect.
How does it charge?
It's charged by a C-type USB cable. It comes with a C-type USB cable.
So if they buy this from you, they'll get the entire
yes,
package?
Yes, it comes with a charger and everything. There's a battery in here. It gives you, let's say, 2.5 days full run, fully charged. The charging port to the back, the battery inside with the LED lights or LED strips inside.
All right. So how?
And sorry, Malika, just not for decorated house or lights. I mean, sometimes this is for the folks that wear this on their hands. The married folks. I mean, you know, you have that little alone time. You want to set a mood. You could also use them in the mood mode, as I mentioned.
But it's not only married people who have alone time.
No, I'm promoting marriage here. The right things we're promoting.
All right, great. Wonderful. That is good. Our operator is giving us the signal. We have to go. Charlon, thank you so very much for coming. He's going to be back next week, and he's going to try to give you different aspects of it. But again, Christmas is coming soon. They're really good for gifts. You can gift yourself. and it's a unique gift. I don't know if Charlotte wants to tell you about cost. Charlotte, tell them how they can get in contact with you. People may be interested in it to see how it works. This is actually, we don't have the time, but he brought it to show you how he,
assembles
how he assembles it. But next time we will try to get that. All right, this is where we have to wrap up our program. Charlotte, thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
Before I wrap up, just tell them quickly how they can get in touch with you.
You can get me on 669-1001. The name is Charlotte Ross. The cost of it is just $7,500.
All right, and we'll try to have him back next week to break it down for you. We'll try to get some more time for the final word.
Yes.
All right, I want to take this opportunity to thank Rawle Toney for coming, my sports icon, Guyana's sports, one of Guyana's sports journalists. let me correct that. Thank you very much to him for coming and sharing with us. Thank you for inviting us into your homes, and we trust that you will invite us again next week for another edition of the Malika Ramsey Show. I am Malika Ramsey-McPherson. Thanks for watching, and good night.